Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jarron Stotmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast presented by Olson Group. I'm your host, Jarrod Stotmeister, and I have with me the Tom Olson.
The Tom Olson, yeah. So if you go to any of my social medias, you find me at the Tom Olson.
The Tom Olson. There you go.
Did you know that, Jarrod, or were you just kind of like playing around?
I knew it.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, welcome. And today's episode, we are going to be talking about how to vet a turnkey deal.
Oh, good.
How to vet a turnkey. Yes.
I'd like to learn
just
that.
so you know, right?
Will you teach? Are you going to teach me, Jarrod?
That is not the script.
Okay.
That is not how it's supposed to go.
All right.
And so, no, actually, Tom, since you are the professional, you're the expert.
Okay.
We will be asking you now. In some point, we will be asking you
Jarrod,
to
you might
pretend.
want to ask me about these things before I go on the air.
No, we want to catch you in the moment.
Okay.
And see what happens. All
right.
right. So we're gonna start off.
We're just off the cuff.
Now, first of all, before we get going, let's not go crazy.
Okay.
We are vetting a turnkey deal in this episode. However, You're a new investor and you're looking to invest. What should you do first? So before we get ahead of ourselves looking at how to vet a deal, as a new investor, what should you do first? First and foremost, what are some things you want to get out of the way?
Do you want like first, or do you want like when you're in the deal first?
Not when you're in the deal first. No, we're talking before that.
Okay.
So before we've, found somebody to work with, before we've found a property manager, vetted them, before the vetting of the relationships and the markets, we're talking about before that.
Oh, before that. Good. Okay. So I want to make sure that we're going to do that first.
Right.
So before that, I would recommend that you buy my Active Turnkey book.
Wow, that was wonderful. Couldn't have planned it better.
So yes, but I'm not going to say that just because I'm trying to sell books, because we don't make any money in the books. It doesn't really matter to me if you buy the book or not. But in here, the very first couple chapters talks about financial freedom, and I think that's the reason why most people want to buy rentals in the first place is because of that hope, of that dream to be able to someday have enough passive income coming in to be able to pay for all their monthly expenses. So if you buy this book, this actually even has a plan for you. And if anybody wants to email me at tolson@goodsuccess.com, I also have a couple 4-page worksheet to kind of help with that as well. Help figure out how to create a financial freedom plan for you. What is it? What is financial freedom? What does it mean to you? And I think that's the first thing you have to do, though, because in that you create why you want to do it. And I think if you will know why you want financial freedom, when you kind of have bumps and bruises, and you will, it'll be worth it. Me and my wife, we went to these classes before we had our kids, birthing classes. And, the lady kept saying through it over and over and over again, she's like, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. But in the end, it's going to be worth it.
I didn't think it was that bad.
It wasn't that bad for you, Jarrod, but I think it was that Fair bad for the women. So I'll make sure Rachel knows that you didn't think it was that bad.
I was kidding.
But anyway, so I think you have to know why you're in it. Now, I think sometimes knowing why you want it and having all these plans is great, but I think the next step that you need to take every single time when you start working with a new provider is to know that provider and know who they are, know who they hang out with, know other investors that invest with them, know the market a little bit. And this is kind of why, lately there's been a couple scam alerts have kind of come up with different areas of the country and different turnkey providers. And, part of me says, yes, that's a horrible thing that they went out and they sold properties in Vegas. There's a hint right there. Don't buy properties in Vegas. So that's my tip of the day. Don't buy properties in Vegas. But part of me says shame on them. Like shame on the buyers. Like, yes, you can say all you want about the turnkey provider that whatever you want to call him. Sure. Wouldn't even call him a turnkey provider. Sure. I'd probably just call him a con artist. But if you're buying rental properties that up front, I should say that you don't know up front. So if you're buying properties that you think are rented, that you think are performing, that you think are rehabbed, and they're not, like that's happening all the time because there's a bunch of people out there that unfortunately are not good people. And so the first thing I would do is vet person that you're buying from, make sure that they're real. Go to their office. You want to see that they have a business. I mean, you want to be able to go there and know, hey, if I have a problem, I have some place I can go. If something's not going to be right, because you have to understand, like, there's a reason why you don't want to manage your own properties. And that's because it's a lot of work. So you need to have somebody that's doing that work for you. And you have no idea how many times I hear over and over and over again, I bought this property, thought it was great. And sometimes I even hear, hey, this property was cash flowing for me for 2 years. And then when it turned over, it never got rented again. And it's been 6, 8, 9 months. And because people just aren't managing very well. So you have to make sure that the people that you are working with are real, are trustworthy, you believe them, you like them, you trust them, and that they are going to be a good steward of your business. The relationship you have with that person is, in my opinion, far superior and is so much more important than the house you get and the numbers that you see. And I think all those things are important. And if I'm betting a deal, yes, you better believe I'm going to vet the numbers. I'm going to look at the numbers. I'm going to look at how old the property is. I'm going to think to myself, maybe if it's a little older property, may have a little bit more in repairs over the long haul. But maybe it's been updated. So maybe it has brand new electric and brand new plumbing and brand new roof, and it has all those things have been checked into. And if it is, then maybe it won't have more repairs than an older property. But I think the most important thing when you're vetting a turnkey deal is to vet the actual company backing the deal.
I really like how you put that. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, but it as like John Morey, one of our guys in our network, would say, it takes two to tango. He's kind of a dance aficionado.
Yes, he does a salsa dancing.
He does. He likes it. He really likes it.
Yep.
He'll do it anywhere. Just ask him.
Yep.
But I really like that it takes two to tango. So we want to get really mad at those guys who rip us off or at people off. But we also want to let the people who didn't do their due diligence kind of give them a pass. I think that's legitimate.
And honestly, shame on them. If I did that, I feel like I would have nobody to blame but myself.
Sure.
And if you're the type of person that doesn't want to take responsibility, then you're probably not going to do good in any parts of business. But I believe that you have to take responsibility for what is on you, because the turnkey buyer has responsibility in this just as much as the turnkey provider has responsibility in this. And I think that if you don't take that serious, then I would just tell you to just dump your money in the stock market and just hope that it goes up like you would at a casino.
Sure. And I'm sure that'll happen.
I'm sure, yes, absolutely.
That'll go well for him.
You got it. So, and it might go well some years, and it may not go well other years. It is what it is. And so we're in this show, not this specific show, but a lot of shows, we talk about the benefits, the ups and the downs. We talk about, the fact that we build rental portfolios for investors, and we've seen hundreds and hundreds of deals over the years, and we kind of know what's coming to a certain degree, but we also know that the benefit, and in the end, it's going to be worth it.
Sure. No, that's really good. I think it's really important for us to set that expectation as much as possible. And again, a turnkey provider should do that, or anyone who's assisting you should kind of say, hey, look out for these situations. And sometimes it may get a little irritating when you're constantly bringing these up, but I think it's really important. So that this is a vet the turnkey deal episode, but we definitely want to lay the foundation there that you need to vet your team. So here we go. When you are analyzing a turnkey deal, Tom Olson,
Yep.
What do you look for first?
Well, I think over the years, turnkey, not just turnkey, but really any kind of investment when it comes to real estate, there's a couple of rules that people like to follow, and that one of those is the 1% rule. And, which basically means if you can buy a house, or if you're all in a house, purchase plus repairs so let's just use a round term of $100,000 just for the sake of round numbers. So if you're going to buy a turnkey deal for $100,000, that means that the house should rent for at least $1,000. So that's like a typical standard, I think, a sub-zero, a line zero, whatever you want to call it, rule that I think you probably should stick by. I can see in some cases if for some reason you had to pay no property tax, maybe you could go a little bit below that. Maybe it would work. But for the most part, I don't see many rental properties working unless there's at least that 1% rule. Now, this obviously takes out any property that's probably over $250,000, $300,000 because there's going to be this curve in which that doesn't make sense anymore. Right. So somewhere in that realm, and it's different in every market. You know, in California, you know, there is no 280 houses. Is there $280,000 houses? So, I mean, in California, there's probably no houses out there, but there's people that still invest.
Sure.
So why do they invest?
They're prospecting.
Well, they're speculating, and it's okay because sometimes it pays off. Just like sometimes you can speculate in the stock market, and sometimes it will pay off. Absolutely, but I think for me, if you're asking me how I vet a deal, like I think that 1% rule is a good baseline. However, like for me, it's just not good enough. Sure. You know, for me, like I'm looking at like at least 1.1. I'm probably really pushing 1.2. If it's an A-class neighborhood, then I think 1% is okay. Yeah. Like if it's A-class, you know, really good schools, really good everything, I think 1% works. You may not make as much in cash flow. Right. I think the actual cash flow on those is probably more like a 6%, you know, return. And if you're happy with that, which many people are happy with 6%, I mean, it's 6% cash return. So like you have to think about it in terms of that's still way more than 6% because, you know, the average appreciation for the long haul is going to be 2-3%. So you can already add on 2 to 3%. And there's lots more things that you can add on, depreciation and all the tax benefits you get as well. So I'm not saying that if you did 1%, it would be a bad thing. But for me, like I like maybe a little bit better numbers than that. Sure. You know, so for me, if it's a B-class neighborhood, I'm probably looking at minimum 1.1. I'm trying to probably push that to 1.2 if I can. So if I'm going to buy a house for $105,000, it's probably going to rent for at least $1,250. If I'm going to buy a house personally for $120, it's probably going to rent for $1,400-ish or so. You know, so and there is a little less headache and a little less turnover and a little less maintenance with those B-class, you know, properties. So you have to take that into account. But if I'm in the C-class neighborhoods, if I'm buying in the 50s and 60s, like I really want a 1.5. Like I really go by the 1.5. That's kind of more like, so that means if I'm buying a house for $50,000 or $55,000, I'm thinking it's going to rent between $8,000 and $850. And if that doesn't work, and it doesn't, I know it doesn't work in every area of the country that has those types of properties. I just don't buy in. That's just me. And that's probably why I like Northwest Indiana because we get to be able to produce those numbers over and over and over again. And, you know, for me, like this is why I think this is one of the best kept secrets in the United States as far as rental properties goes is the Northwest Indiana area.
Sure. And of course, that goes back into a whole other issue of criteria, not even issue or another podcast, like you say, is criteria for investors. Some want the A, some want the C plus or whatever. So we can definitely get into that. But no, that's really good. The 1% rule for sure.
I personally prefer B and C class neighborhood. You know, like I actually kind of like the better C's and the lower B's. Like that's if you ask me my sweet spot, that's probably where I like to be. But you know, everybody's different. You know, some people want a little bit higher potential return. If I'm looking at a deal as well, and especially if I'm an out-of-state investor, I do want to know what's going on in the area. I do want to know, is this a complete declining market or is this a market that's been going up and it's going to steadily go up or steadily go down? Whatever it is, like I really want to know what that looks like from a larger perspective because for me, it's a long-term play. Sure. I am not buying a rental ever to buy it for a year or two and just tip my toe and then be like, okay, it didn't work, let me get out. No, so when I'm investing in a rental property, to me, I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to be in this thing a minimum of 5 years, and I'm probably going to be in this for 20 or more years. So what I want to look at is 20 years ago, you know, what's the difference between what is worth 20 years ago versus what is it worth today? And then kind of also look at the other economic factors. Are there jobs coming to this area? Or have all the jobs left or are all the jobs leaving? Or is it a super strong economy and it's never had any bumps and bruises? That sometimes isn't always a good thing because eventually you have, you know, some hardships. Is there hardships in this area? Am I doing a little bit of this as a social help to somebody? Because that's for me, that's who I am. You know, I like to be able to help the community. And, you know, for me, I'm willing to be more of a risk taker when I think it's going to help the community. So again, that's me. I'm not giving advice of what somebody else should do, but you asked me what I would do, and those are some of the things that I look at and I think about. You know, how is this having an impact on my community or on the community in which I'm buying? When I'm vetting a deal, I mean, obviously, I want to know what condition the property's in. So if I'm buying an active turnkey, which obviously is what we sell active turnkey and turnkey. So if I'm the buyer that wants to buy the active turnkey product, and I'm the buyer that says, hey, I want to try to be in this less, then I want to know, what needs to be done to the property. I probably want to see pictures of the property a little bit. I want to know, is there an actual real estimate on the property from a construction company, or is there just some number that's been thrown at me from some wholesaler that doesn't really know how much construction cost, or artificially lowers the cost of construction just to sell a property.
Make a deal work.
So I'm looking at all those things if I'm investing out of state. And then if it's a turnkey property, I want to know what was done to the rehab. What is guaranteed? Because most turnkey providers will guarantee. I do not recommend taking on rent guarantees. I do not, unless it's like a very short period of time. I do not guarantee. I do not. If somebody's going to offer me a maintenance guarantee for a year, like I'm actually a little leery about that. I do believe that any work that was done in a rehab should be guaranteed for at least a period of a year. So I think I'll take that warranty. And there may be some other slight warranties, like a roof warranty, because it has new shingles, it has 25 years maybe on the shingles. The labor is probably only guaranteed for a year. But I just want to know what are all these things. And I'm just going to kind of ask those questions. I want to look at the age of the house. I want to look at the age of the roof if it's not new. I want to know the age of the major appliances. I want to know when the last time, pretty much the same things an insurance company would ask. So when an insurance company reaches out to you and they ask you, if you're trying to get insurance on a house, they ask you how old is the roof. They ask you when was the last time that the plumbing was updated? When was the last time the HVAC was updated? Is this knob and tube electric, or is this updated breakers? Why
would they ask about those specific things?
Well, why do you think? Because they're going to insure your property. So to me, I'm looking at it the same way insurance companies know. Insurance companies have been through a century or more of claims over and over and over again. They know what the long-term data tells them that they should be looking at. So, to me, if they're going to ask those questions, I want to ask the same questions, and I just think I think it's a very smart thing to think about. I would personally probably want to know a little bit about, like I said, the economics of the area. I'd like to know what the expected rent is. If it's an active turnkey. If it's a turnkey, most of the time it's already rented, so you kind of already know what that means. I want to know what the taxes are and what the tax environment is in that area. For us locally here, we have some extra taxes that get added onto our taxes every year, and it's more like voter approved stuff that happens and it comes on and comes off. So that's something you need to understand. I would want to understand, is there something like that? Are my taxes going to go way up? Taxes is something I need to know, as a general rule. Know what your taxes are, because you might buy a house. There's an area, Jarrod, that's 30 minutes from where we sit right now. And it's not in the state of Indiana, so let that be a hint to you.
I'm doing the math.
I'm not sure what state it's in, right, Jarrod? But people are Illinoised when they move out of the state. So there are areas in which you can buy houses right now for 30, 40, 50 grand, and the 1% rule works really good. Almost 2% you can get on some of these areas, but their taxes are 6 or 7 or 8 grand. So you could buy a house for 30 grand, and the taxes are going to cost you like $700 a month. So that's not really that good of
it's a good deal, bad deal.
It's not. I would say it's a bad deal. So okay. I wouldn't. So taxes are a big deal, and that's kind of where I was saying, there are some areas of the country where a 1% rule might work really well because their taxes are artificially lower than other areas of the country. Our taxes in Indiana and Northwest Indiana specifically are probably a hair above the national average. They're nowhere near close to the high end of some other states, but they're just a hair above. And we used to kind of be in the lower echelon of taxes. We're probably right in the middle, maybe just a hair above. And Northwest Indiana is probably a hair above. The state of Indiana might actually be average low. So I know some properties in Indianapolis. People do like Indianapolis as a turnkey market, and their rents are nowhere near as strong as ours, but their taxes are a little bit lower than ours. So the numbers kind of start to work a little bit better. I still think all in all, Northwest Indiana still produces a little bit better deal over the long haul and over the year because the rents are so much higher. So like know all those numbers. Know what your rents are. Know what your taxes are. Know how much insurance is going to cost. Know when the house was built. Know what major improvements have been done. When were the major things in the house done, like your roof, like your windows, like has your foundation ever had any kind of issues, or how old is that? I'm not getting into the nitty gritty, but I want to know the major components for sure. If you buy a turnkey rental property, I'd expect the place to be painted. I'd expect new flooring. I'd expect some things like that, unless like it's disclosed up front. There's some times where we may even sell a property that hasn't been rehabbed, but it's been rented for a long time, and it just has a good renter in there. We tell them up front, hey, this house might need a little bit of money when somebody moves out, but it's livable. People are living in there, and it's in good shape, but it may need paint. It may need carpet when somebody moves out. So I mean, to me, it's just all about knowing as much about the deal as I can possibly know before I go into it. Those are the things that I'm looking at. I mean, other things that you can do to help negate your upfront exposure is you can do a home inspection. Those are some other things that some of our investors will do. Sometimes we'll even provide them for them. We actually have our own home inspector that goes out and helps us identify things that maybe we missed. So like to me, like, getting a report from a home inspector of what things are. What I don't like to do personally is I don't like to pay for a home inspection. I don't like to pay $400 for a home inspection. Sure. So if there's a way to be able to get that, just the things that are wrong, sometimes you can get an inspector to get that list to you for like $200 or something a little cheaper. That's something that I would recommend doing. I think it's important to get an outsider's opinion on what the property would look like. So, other than that, I mean, what do you think, Jarrod? I mean, you're sitting here, you talk to the turnkey buyers. Is there something that I might be missing? But that's, for me, like, that's off the top of my head. I mean, you didn't give me any time to prepare on this. So, I mean, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, but that's what I'm looking for.
No, I think you nailed it. So in our experience, we work with a lot of professionals. That was in my script. He told me to say, I think you nailed it, Tom. I didn't say Tom, but no, I in my experience working with some professionals, a lot of times they want to say, Jarrod, I trust you. Or Tom, I trust you, right? How many times have you heard that?
I hope that,
a lot of times. And we like to hope that. Now you like to have people who you say, I trust you, actually be a type of people who are trustworthy. But it's really interesting to see people who aren't in real estate at all, and they do say, I trust you. And then they start doing like these active turnkey deals where there's rehabs, and so they don't know the questions to ask. And what's really exciting for me, I remember one time there a guy named John, he had purchased several houses. Now he's purchased 20 from us, and he has a total of 23 units with us. And he's doing several active turnkey deals. And probably about 8 or 9, I sold him a house in an area called Whiting, which is smoking hot right now in our market. And it was an older home, late 1800s actually, pretty old. The rehab was fairly light. It was a fairly cosmetic rehab, and so he said, "Hey, Jarrod, I see the rehab numbers. A good number. Looks like the house is in good shape. Tell me this, Jarrod. The house is a little bit older. Has the house been updated as far as electrical? Has the plumbing been updated? What's the situation there?" And sometimes you, as a person in sales, he sometimes questions or this or that. I almost clapped in person because as far as the education side, he was getting it. He didn't ask me those questions before. He didn't really know what questions to ask. But in this situation, you brought up the insurance questions. And so to him, that's what he hit. He hit on the electrical. He hit on the plumbing. The important numbers, especially with an older home. And I was really happy that even in active turnkey, where he's not actually hammering, he's not here, he's not checking the house weekly, he was actually asking the right questions. He was learning. And that really helps when you can partner with somebody and build on that. So I do think that the insurance thing is a really good idea. Nail on those items that are heavy hitters, and I doubt the insurance company.
Yeah, because you're going to get hit with something like,
sure.
Like if you're an investor that thinks that you can buy a property and then you're never going to have anything to ever have to do with it, then you shouldn't get into this business, because it's not the case.
Right.
But it's like if you think you're going to buy a house and then think that's the same thing, then you should never buy a house. Because I bought a house that was super well maintained. It was built like in the 60s or 70s, and an older gentleman lived there. And he took such good care of this place. He had every receipt from every single thing that he had purchased. New windows, new roof, he had all these things like in a notebook for me. He had 2 of them like this big each. So I had like about this many different receipts and different warranties and different things that he bought for me. But we've been living in this house for like 2.5 years, and we have probably put at least $3,000 or $4,000 worth of stuff into this house that was super well maintained with, really good finishes and really good everything, just because things go bad. Like we had our rods, our drains had to be rotted when we got there. We've had to replace a couple sump pumps. We've had to, and this is in my own personal house that I live in. B plus tape, A minus probably house, B plus area, and and to me, like, if you think that nothing's ever going to go bad on a house, like I would recommend you don't buy any kind of turnkeys from anybody. But just understanding that and thinking, knowing what your risk is going in, because I think the risk going into an active turnkey, I always want to talk about worst case scenario. So worst case scenario for an active turnkey, in my opinion, is there's like something major that happens in the rehab, and that does happen. We have it probably happen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% of the time, and it seems like with cities lately that number's even kind of jumped up to even maybe higher than that. But for a turnkey, like your risk, most of that risk has been negated. I shouldn't say never, because occasionally something still comes up that you have no idea about. And sometimes it doesn't matter what you do with a inspection or what you do with anything, you just never would have found issues that come up, because these houses, and what's funny is, like, I've even seen a brand new build house have a $20,000 extra afterwards from a new homeowner that's living in the house, of things that come up that were not expected, or something happens, and it's not like it's not talked about enough. And so me knowing that there is a risk out there, I want to know what all those risks are and what I can do to possibly negate those risks. So again, like I other than that, like the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter to me. The finishes don't really matter to me that much. I want a clean house. I want to improve maybe a little bit more than everybody else in the neighborhood, because my strategy more is trying to not really push rents, but I want to be on the top end of rents. I am not the guy that wants to be on the low end of rents. I know that there's this talk out there where if you're a little bit cheaper than everybody else, then your tenants stay longer and it saves you so much money over the long haul. I don't really believe in that. I think you lose so much money over, like, because I've seen rents in a $900 or $900 price point be $200 difference. That's a lot of, that's $2,400 a year you're losing. So, to me, like I really would rather be really at strong market rent, but with strong market finishes. So I don't think you have to go over the top, but I really think something like, granite or quartz countertops, things that like every other renter does not have. Even something as simple as putting in those what do you call them? The plugs that actually have the USB ports in them. Just something simple like that costs $15 extra. Little things like that. If you can do things like that for your residents, your tenants that live in your properties, that's what's going to keep them from staying longer. And if you vet them really well up front, that's what's going to keep them in there. If you communicate with them, if you have easy processes for them to pay, like that's, to me, I would rather get them to stay in there from an emotional standpoint than the fact that they're paying $50 less a month, because those are the type of people I want.
No, that's really good. So even kind of touching base with what you were talking about, I know this is vetting a turnkey deal, but you kind of talked about the idea of when things come up, and it's just going to come up in turnkey conversation. Is the idea that a lot of times, especially on the front end, you'll have an active turnkey deal or a Burr method deal, depending on whatever you want to call it. You buy it, the numbers in the beginning all look to be right, and then you have a couple $1,000 extra, and you can. I've had a couple people who are upset over just a couple $1,000, and you want to pull them back and say, hey, now first of all, you bought right, you bought at a good price, okay, and let's pull back a little bit and look at this in the snapshot again of the 30 years. As opposed to the moment. Now, is it painful today? Yes, but I like to tell people, hey, 5 years from now, are you even really going to remember that you had a couple $1,000 extra on a rehab? No. But instead of going crazy and then getting emotional and then maybe ruining a relationship, but yeah, that's kind of a little secondary there, but just something to think about as you're working with somebody and managing a project like that. So, okay, so we talked about some things you're looking for. First, you went to several different things, and you brought the insurance thing. I thought that's a really good idea. So, what are some of the most important factors you're looking at? You talked about 1%. We're talking about all those different types of things. What is the most important thing you look at when you're making that decision?
I am looking at the manager first. I'm looking at the market second. Like, I want to be in a market that I have a potential to have inflation.
Okay.
I'm not saying it has to be there. I want the potential. Like, I don't want to be in a market that is on a slide. So I want to be careful about, if a market's hit rock bottom, that's where I want to be. Like, I'm okay. I'm okay with hard markets, but I'm not. I want to know that there's hope. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for hope in a market. I want to, and then third is the actual deal itself, is the actual house. It's the numbers, but the numbers, like, they all three have to work. Like, I have to have it's kind of like a note. You have these 3 points, these three things you have to have when you buy a note. You have to have a really good person. You have to have really good paperwork, and then you've got to have you have to have a really good person. You have to have good paperwork, and you have to have good collateral. So if I'm a note investor, if I'm a lender, those three things have to happen. Same thing here. Like, there's three things that have to happen. I have to have a really good property manager. I have to have property that I think is really going to be really good. And then I also need to have a market. So those are the three things that I look at if I'm buying. I mean, that's a little bigger picture, but we kind of gotten in the weeds a little bit. But if I want to back out, like, those are the three things that I think over the long haul are going to make all the difference.
And that makes a lot of sense then. So basically, in many cases then, because what I see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in many cases, we get really stuck on cash flow, and we're talking about really a few dollars per deal difference. In the end, what you talked about really wasn't about the deal per se. It was about the everything around it. So once you've kind of identified an area in a market, a deal's a deal.
It's never the deal that you make the money on. It's never the deal. It's always the deal after the deal. It is always the deal after the deal that you make money in real estate.
Are you allowed to say that right now? That was like a secret sauce or something.
That is a secret sauce, but I'm telling you, it's always the deal after the deal.
Go into that more.
So sure, great. So I will give you a live example of me and my own personal family and my own personal house. So one of the ways I have created financial freedom for myself is, out of the first 5 or 6 houses that me and my wife lived in, we just continued to own them. So it's very easy to get another mortgage on a new personal house for you to live in, and you just keep that old mortgage. You don't have to qualify as an investor. You don't have to go through all this other rigmarole. It's just you're buying a new house and you're just keeping your old mortgage. And as long as you can afford it, banks will give you as many of them as they can possibly give you. So that was one of the reasons how we created financial freedom for ourselves. And I'll give you like a really hard example of me. Like, me and my wife moved to Crown Point in a great time for us. Me and my wife were making really good money. We had just had our first kid, and we bought this great house.
Crown Point's like an A
in which
area.
We thought was a pretty good deal at the time, and it needed some work a little bit. So we moved in this house, lived there for about a year or two, and then our economy, our personal economy, got just pulled out from underneath us. At that time, I actually moved me and my family to Gary, Indiana, and I kept that house. So I was renting out an A-class house while living in a C- area, and C- house. And and for me, like, the rent that I was getting throughout the whole time kind of just held that deal together. But last year, we sold that property and made like $70,000 on that property, because we held on to it. Now, if we would have sold in the middle of like everything going bad, we probably would have walked away with nothing. But because we held on to it, and because we let the rent and everything collect that and just hold it together, and that, I shouldn't even say it held it together, because we probably made money on it. I think our mortgage payment on this thing was about $800, and our rent on the thing was probably $1,400 or so. So we definitely made money over the years. But, every time a tenant moves out, we had to go in and put a couple $1,000s into the deal. But at the end, like, it was well worth it, because like we decided to hold on to the deal. And that never would have happened if we weren't open to that deal after the deal type of environment. And to you have to put yourself in the give yourself the opportunity to make that happen. Because you sometimes you just don't know when that time of the market's going to happen. So I mean, and so that's just a quick example, but
that's good.
I'm going to tell you like that. I see that happen over and over and over and over again. In fact, I know investors where sometimes they make a mistake. They'll make a mistake on a fix and flip, and then they'll rent it for 2 or 3 years, and then they'll sell it, and then make 30 or 40 grand.
They made money the whole time.
And they were at least cash flowing. Maybe they only made $100 or $200 throughout the time. But if you don't give yourself that opportunity, you'll never see that. I think too many people are out there preaching, teaching that it's all about the cash flow. And I believe in cash flow, so don't get me wrong. I think you want to be in a cash flow market. But I think this notion that we're going to make $300 on every single deal, and that's going to be kind of like the automatic. I think $300 is a really good benchmark if you don't include the CapEx, if you don't include the vacancy and maintenance. I think that's a really good number to be without those. And I know a lot of people that's all their performers have. Their performers don't even have any kind of number for vacancy and maintenance. I think with vacancy and maintenance, I like to make somewhere between 225 and 250 is really kind of what I'm shooting for, with some kind of vacancy and maintenance included in those deals. So when it comes to like the actual numbers, like I don't really like taking, even if it's a cheap house, I don't really like taking them unless I'm making something after those numbers are all kind of, so I'm looking at 220, 230, 240, 250. And that's what I think. Really, that's what the real cash flow is. And sometimes, some years you'll have where that gets taken away because you have some kind of repair and maintenance, but you're getting all those other extras in there. I have, on the flip side, I've seen people show how you make 50% on a rental. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to be that person either. I just think that for me, it's part of my financial freedom plan, and I think it should be part of every person's financial freedom plan.
No, it's really good. Of course, the personal illustration, going back to your house, is always a better illustration than just a case, just an idea. So I think that definitely brings a lot of validity to the point. So real quickly, so on the other end of it, we're talking about bidding a turnkey deal. So are there any other data points that people talk about that we could say are overrated? That when we would look at it, it's something that's talked about, but maybe a little bit of over-focus, over analysis of the deal. You know what I'm saying? I think things that could be there that would maybe say this is something you should stay away from, when actually it's just kind of a secondary data point.
Boy, now I'm going to be an attorney and say it all depends. So
wow, that was good.
Because honestly, think about it. If you were buying in California in 2009, it may not have mattered. Some of these points don't matter if you're buying in a market right after an unnatural crash that may never happen again. Does that make sense? But when we're in the market that we're in now, which some people think that we're close to the top, I'm not even so sure about that. I think we may have a long runway. I think there's some areas of the country that are overpriced, and I think the higher end parts have a whole lot more of a potential for loss than some of your sub $200,000 markets. But I don't really see sub $200,000 markets doing much over the next 10 years unless there's some real major change in the economic attitude that we have right now. But I think we're having a problem with affordability before we have another problem before we have any other problem. But now I forgot where I was going with that, Jarrod.
Well, data points.
What overrated? I think sometimes the cap rate is a little overrated. I think sometimes cash on cash return is a little overrated. I really do like to see at least a minimum per month profit. Like that's just me, but maybe that's even a little bit overrated because I know how much money else is in the deals in other ways. But I think you just have to figure out what works for you. So really what is going to be acceptable for you, and then just go with it. But you've got to go back to the first things first. You've got to vet the area, the market, you've got to vet the person, and you've got to vet the property and make sure that it's going to, withstand and be a good long-term investment.
I guess if I'm saying overrated, it's not in my notes, but if you're talking about an overrated stat, is there an underrated stat? I know in the past you've talked about, of course we talked about depreciation, but actually the pay down of the mortgage as being an underrated piece. Is there anything underrated
stats? I love to see properties turned over quick. I'd love to know how much time is your market time on data. Like how long does it take to get a property rented once it's marketed? Those are the ones that really you can't show in a pro forma. So the numbers that I think are underrated because they're not rated at all are probably sometimes more important. So how quick can you get a place rented?
That's true.
And honestly, something that we do that I really like is the fact that we do quarterly inspections. If you're buying a rental property and it's never getting inspected ever, like you have no idea what to expect in the long haul. So, I mean, this is part of the reason why I love single family rentals is because it's very transparent, and I like dealing in the truth. I'm a Christian, and it's part of just like who I have been ingrained in with, knowing that the Bible is the truth and knowing like that in order to have real wisdom, you have to know what the real truth of the matter is. And to me, like I love in single family investing because if you have a good property manager, it's very easy to know every single month where my property's at and what's going on with it. Right. And not that I want, and honestly, I don't even want to know, but I want to be able to know if I want. So that's why I think even honestly, another underrated stat is what technology is your property manager using? Is your property manager still sending you like old school stuff, or are they really working with the new Appfolio or Buildium or some of these really awesome new things? It really helps their job go quicker and makes things more efficient, so they can offer way higher level of service. And I think that those things are things that I think really, does your property manager have processes? Do they have check in and check out processes? Do they have marketing processes? All those things I think are the underrated things that aren't really stats. They're not statistics that I can come up with or drum up on a spreadsheet or on a pro forma, but they're sometimes the most important piece of the whole puzzle.
And they're not generally on a pro forma.
Exactly.
And not really talked about too much. So you're absolutely right.
Exactly.
So real quickly before we end it, last question: Are there any non-negotiables? Is there something you just I will refuse to buy this house unless it has this?
So like I said, I want to hit all 3 points. So to me, it's not like if it only hits 2 of these points, is it 2 out of 3? No, like for me, it's all 3. Like I have to hit, just like if I'm investing in a note, it's got to have really good paperwork. It's got to have a really good person backing it, and the asset backing it has to work as well. So the same thing with this, it has to have the asset I have to be okay with. Like and it doesn't mean I have to live there. It doesn't mean I have to even want to live there, but I got to be okay with the asset. I got to be okay with the market, and I have to be okay with the person. Like to me, those are the only non-negotiables. As far as that goes, I mean, am I going to buy a rental property that's only going to, if I have a pro forma sent to me and it's probably only going to cash flow $150 and we haven't even put in any kind of maintenance or repairs or any kind of vacancy, like I'm probably not going to buy that house. But it's, you asked me the non-negotiables, absolutely no. I wouldn't say that because, I might, if I'm getting the house for 20 or 30% off of what the market value is, hey, I mean, where else can you instantly get 20 or 30 grand? So like, when it comes to money, like the money to me, and I know this is not going to be what most turnkey people out there are going to talk about, but for me, money is not the biggest, most important piece about this. I do think that it's going to come, but I think money's all about the back end for when it comes to rentals. It's not like in the day-to-day today right now. It's in the long term, and it's in all the appreciation. It's in the depreciation. It's in everything else that you don't see. It's the deal after the deal where you make all the money.
Awesome. Well, it's really good stuff. I hope you guys enjoy this podcast today. As Tom said before, we do have the Active Turnkey book. Just walks you through all those things, and Tom goes into detail about how the system works and what you should be looking for. Also, we do build rental portfolios for investors, so if you're interested in building a rental portfolio or adding to your rental portfolio, you can talk to me. You can give me a call or email me at Jarrod at Olson Group, or visit us at buyolsongroup.com.
It's B-U-Y.
B-U-Y.
Like you're going to buy some houses.
B-U-Y-O-L-S-O-N, Olson, buyolsongroup.com. And thank you for joining us on the Active Turnkey podcast.
The best way to buy rentals.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.